But what I decided to do in this session was probably to take a perspective which we normally tend to ignore as technologists, right? Being technologists, I realized that all of us get so caught up with the technology aspect and get so excited with technology that we start disassociating ourselves from the business side to figure out how is the utilization of that technology going to enable business, because that's the crux of the matter here. So I will actually start with a very simple kind of an analogy, or I will just give you a quote to say that, analysts like Gartner have been going across and meeting a lot of CXOs. And what's coming across right now is two very key factors. One is the CIOs are becoming younger, right? The average age of CIO today is in his 40s and her 40s, as compared to a few years ago when people were more in their 50s and were looking at that as probably the last part of their entire career path before retiring. Today, it's just the other way around. The CIOs themselves, being in their early 40s, are aspiring to take a bigger role as they move ahead as well. So that's where they're looking towards more of an aspect of business coming into picture, number one. Number two is the fact that business itself is getting very, very challenging as we go across. People are looking towards being very nimble-footed. And keeping that in mind, they want actually to have some very speedy activities happening. They want to have systems rolled out very fast. And that can only come across if the impact of that business is known by the people in the technology teams as well. If you're able to understand and empathize as to why that speed is required. So keeping that in mind, I've actually structured this presentation to talk to you about these kind of trends which are happening and what is the impact from the business side which people are looking for. And I hope this is something which you will see some value as we go across as well. So if you just look at what the Economist Intelligence Unit 2 years ago said, looks like very archaic today. They said that one aspect which is still very applicable is that in the developing world, whatever the systems are being currently developed or planned are something where the innovation is going to be much higher than what's happened already in the developed world, right? And that's because of two reasons. One is there is a limited resources, or there are constraints which we have which are not so much applicable in the developed world as well. So that is the reason that last statement was very, very apt in terms of saying, simply put, there are no alternatives but to become more digital with whatever assets we have today. And that's why we are seeing that, frankly, today, the Africas are becoming really the core where a lot of innovation is coming across with respect to microfinance and mobile wallets coming into picture, because the banking system out there is not very, very robust. And that's where they're finding that with the mobile phones itself, they have a very strong mobile banking or a mobile wallet concept coming into play. So that's one area which is very critical, and for us to appreciate that the developed world is not going to really become the forefront of innovation from a business usage point of view. So what I'm talking about here is basically IT trends and what I call as the new normal, right? Because we're not going to see this as what has been in the past, and this is something which is going to become the future for us to look at. So in the entire IT trends, I'm going to be covering across 3 or 4 key concepts, and everything is going to be hinging on these areas of what we call as the mobile, social, and the cloud, concepts which have been covered across the course of the presentations today, but the fact that at the center is where you have data and information which is becoming very critical as well, right? And that's where we're talking also from an enterprise IT perspective. What are the kind of factors which are going to be affecting the future of IT as well? And just to sum it up, how we as Basil, which is a private equity fund which invests into niche IT technology companies, have actually structured some of these investments to work as an ecosystem itself. Something which AB covered in his first presentation from a technology trends perspective or a mobile trends perspective, I think we all know the fact that the mobile devices, the smart devices, are today dwarfing the growth of PCs, right? When you look at the business intelligence report which came across, as of today, there are roughly around 350 million PCs which are out there in the market, right? But if you look at the combined population of the smart devices and tablets together, it's over 1 billion. And we are not even talking about intelligent devices which we are not even interacting with on a daily basis. which is something which people are looking at future as well. And what the expectation is coming across is that the PCs are going to stagnate, right? I've seen a lot of reports over the last 5 to 10 years today which always keeps talking about the death knell of PCs and how PCs are going to die. But the reality is PCs have not died as yet. On the contrary, there is a growth. While the growth might be limited, there might be a smaller percentage of growth, but the PCs are still going to exist. They're going to coexist with what we have, right? But the smart devices and what we're seeing as tablets are going to be seeing an exponential growth, which is going to change the way we look at interacting with people, right? And of course, the growth rates which we've seen in terms of what PCs which came up in the 80s, the internet which came up in the 90s, and what we're talking about, even the social media, the growth of the smart devices is much, much faster than any of these aspects today. While companies keep talking about the fact that we have bring your own devices to work, which is coming across, it's becoming more and more prevalent. We're seeing that. We've had situations where financial services organizations have only came up with hardened PCs and the fact that I'll give you a hardened device like a BlackBerry, and that's all adhering to my security standards, and you can't use anything else. But over the last couple of years, especially since the iPhone and the iPads came into picture, and the Android devices have really increased in their population, we're seeing that IT setups have had to open up their entire security channels, the firewalls, to allow for these devices to come into picture. And even organizations which have been very risk-averse, not wanting to open up, have been forced to do that with both tablets and with the smartphones coming into play. And that's where these statistics which came across are very, very interesting. While people kept trying to push back in terms of saying no access to corporate systems, the reality is mobile devices have made a mark in the market itself today. And you can't get away from that. The biggest challenge which people have had in the past has obviously been something which Hitesh covered in his presentation as well, as do I look at mobile as just another channel where whatever I've developed as a website can actually just be ported on the mobile device. So it's going back 10 years or 12 years back when people looked at it as a WAP terminal, wireless access protocol, WAP, that's it. Just have a wireless kind of a website available. But today, where people are actually expecting and demanding a kind of a user experience. Because in the past few years, we've seen that everybody's talking about a user experience platform. Nobody talks about things as portals anymore. Nobody talks about just as a website. People are talking about how do I give a good user experience. Gartner itself has been talking about a UXP platform, and there's an IBM stack, there's a Microsoft stack, there's an Oracle stack. But ultimately, what users are expecting is a very simplified experience which comes across, whether I'm on the web, whether on the mobile, and it's actually fine-tuned to that particular channel itself. And something which Gartner came up is by 2015, the mobile application development activities are going to actually far outstrip what we see as the web development activities today. Talking about a 4:1 factor, right? So that means there is a huge opportunity for all of us to relook at how we are approaching the entire mobile application development strategies, right? And what we've done in the past may not necessarily work. We have to relook at the entire approach. So that was one reality which came across. The second aspect is, this is a slide which some of you may have seen before. This is something which was popularized by a company called Numa Partners. And they came up with the aspect of saying that there is so much of a proliferation of social media. Primarily, they talked about it from a personal, social media interaction channels perspective. But what we're seeing is that there is a huge impact right now on what is known as social content management, and there is a complete business angle which is coming across social media as well. I'm not sure if people have been reading reports on social media, but there have been so many reports which have come out in the last few months which says that there is a saturation point which is being reached right now on social media. Users in the UK are actually trying to get out of things like Facebook as well, right? Because it's creating more of a pain today as compared to giving them any further gain on that basis. At the same time, we also realized that there are over 1 billion people who have actually gone across and used social media. So on Facebook alone, you have 900 million plus users who are registered. LinkedIn, 150 million plus. And you're talking about Twitter, who are also having 200 million plus. What has been done in the past, and we've seen in the last 1 year or so, a lot of companies came up with the fact that I need to have a social media presence. I need to have a Facebook presence, I need to have a LinkedIn presence, and I need to actually be talking about having a Twitter presence. Why did that come across? Because if we step back and look at the way marketing and customer services were being handled, two different functions, and they were never seeing eye to eye, right? Marketing always used to be going and literally shouting from the rooftops about what I have, right? If you look at HP's case, you look at Veldoc's case, look at any of the cases which we have across, everybody wanted to talk about what do I have today as a product and what can I give you. On the other hand, customer services was always considered as primarily a call center solution. A customer has a challenge or a problem, he will call up my customer service center or a help desk, and I will just answer that particular question if I can. If I don't, I will talk about coming back to them at an appropriate time, and sometimes that never happened. And I think all of us have faced that challenges with consumer durable goods or consumer non-durable goods as well. But just fast forward now to today's scenario. I'm sitting across in, let's say, Cafe Coffee Day, and I've ordered for a coffee. And it takes 10 minutes for them even to respond to me itself. What do I do? What's the normal behavior today which is happening? Right? Most of us own a mobile device. We're sitting there, we're probably answering some calls or answering some mails, and suddenly realize 15 minutes or 10 minutes and there's nobody even come to look at me. I get very upset. What do? The first thing is I go onto Twitter and tweet saying Cafe Coffee Day in MG Road next to Oberoi, service sucks. Right? Is that reality? Have you seen that behavior? I mean, 70% of all interactions which are coming across on social media channels are primarily customer complaints. Now just imagine that if it was a customer service help desk, you could get away by saying, I'll revert to you. Here you have a tweet which has gone across. It says customer services in Cafe Coffee Day on MG Road sucks. And that is actually just going across to all your contacts who are people who are following you on Twitter. That reflects immediately or has an immediate impact on the impression of Cafe Coffee Day in MG Road straight away. And they could see that having an impact on their business. And I think all of us have read about this particular case where a celebrity on Heathrow Airport tweeted about a particular problem he faced at the Heathrow Airport, and within 15 minutes, mind you, 15 minutes, there was a customer services representative who reached out to him and offered a solution, right? What does that tell you? That today, obviously, the corporates are very concerned about what is being talked about them on the social media sites as well, right? So the entire way mobile adoption has changed social media is very, very different because people have more access, they shout, and they're heard, right? So customer services is undergoing a sea change in the way they have to approach the clients as well. And gone are the days where marketing and customer services could be completely segregated. Today they have to work together because it's coming down to 1:1 marketing. It's coming down to how do I handle a customer services, take certain interactions offline, and create a more positive image about myself. Let's look at one more aspect. You want to buy, let's say, a new refrigerator or a new TV. What is the first thing we do today? You browse the internet, look at competing products, how does it figure? Reviews, right? Expert reviews as well as customer feedback in terms of what has been the usage, etc. That obviously gives us another very powerful kind of a tool to decide what do I buy and what do I not buy. Can a company choose to ignore these aspects, right? And that's where this aspect is becoming very powerful. Companies today can't just take an ostrich approach and say, I will just bury my head in the sand and forget about it. They've got to look at an aspect of saying, how do I engage with customers? And that's where people start looking towards saying, how do I engage with a customer? Next aspect is, if I've engaged with a customer, how do I convert that into a revenue model, right? And you've heard about, whether it's been Lakme where they came up with the concept of the gang of girls, right? It became very, very popular as a concept. They started, and recently there was an article which came across where Micromax, from the mobile perspective, when they were changing their logo, they actually first gave options and took feedback on the social media in terms of what looks better. So crowdsourcing, come back with feedback, and using that customer feedback, go across and change their logo as well. So different companies have started using social media in a very different and innovative manner. But not to forget the customer experience, right? So while you talk about revenue model, you talk about customer touch points coming into picture, which is to build a loyalty, they're also talking about customer experience. Unless and until a customer has a positive experience, there's no way I can actually hold on to them or get them to talk about positive aspects about my brand and expand my business. So those are the key challenges which is coming across. Is social media something which is new? Right? It's not new. It's been there for a few years, but suddenly in the last 1 year, people have started talking much more about the impact of social media, and companies have taken very seriously how do they engage with customers. What has led to this change? The simple aspect is more smart devices which are out there. Sorry? It is becoming more pervasive, absolutely. And the concepts of the innovation which is there, or the initial kind of aspect of saying I have a certain intrigue value of just connecting with my friends on Facebook, right? Or I talk about uploading photos and sharing all these experiences, that novelty factor over a period of time has come down. People are saying, how much time can I spend on Facebook alone, right? And if you look at the developing countries, there is lesser usage of Facebook for those aspects as compared to trying to find out what can I buy, what kind of deals can I get. So today it's not unheard of, whereas in direct marketing, when we used to talk about direct marketing initiatives, our response used to be like 2%. If I send out 100 flyers, probably only 2 people might respond to it or take up my offer of a coupon. But if I have a very strong customer engagement channel on Facebook, and if I give certain promotions out there, the likelihood of that getting taken up is much more because I have a very, very focused group. So I can test new products. I can get feedback on those new products as prototypes before I actually launch a new product. So that's where there's a huge kind of a benefit which is coming across. And there's just one aspect, right? The third aspect which is becoming very important as well is on the cloud pervasiveness, right? So let me hold back here. What do you think is a cloud as a concept? On demand. Is it a new concept? From a technology point of view, is it a completely radical new approach to computing? No. Why do you say no? The concept there was all storage, all computing power, everything resided at the back end. I only had a dumb monitor and a keyboard which was accessing and getting me the entire information. What are we doing with mobile devices today? Right? It's a different way of thinking, right? It's just saying that ultimately what I've done is I've come back a full circle. Right? I just come back a full circle. I went from cloud to client server to entire architecture, and now I'm coming to cloud again. Right? Only difference is I have a tool which is much more accessible to people. The adoption rates is much higher. Right? So that's one area which I wanted to put as a thought-provoking article. Second is, when you think of cloud, what comes to mind first? Do you use cloud in your daily life today? Correct. Examples, iCloud, Dropbox, right? A lot of us use from collaboration perspective or sharing pictures or sharing files, with family or friends across the globe. But these are all public cloud solutions, right? Now the challenge which comes from the IT manager or the IT team's perspective is when people have access to these smart devices, whether it's an iPhone or an iPad or an Android tab, etc., each of them today are using these. I mean, am I going to be naive enough to assume that some of my corporate documents or reports are not being stored on these Dropboxes or iClouds of the world? A simple thing on the iPad from a Dropbox account tells me that from my laptop, if I upload the Dropbox account and I need that document to be available even in offline mode on the iPad, I can make it a favorite. And it's available for me there, right? And I want to do that because at night, maybe when I have even half an hour, I want to skim through that document without having to bothering to switch on my laptop at all. I do that. I'm sure there are other people also doing a similar thing, right? Now that's where the challenge comes across. There is this dichotomy or the challenge from an IT perspective of saying, how do I control the enterprise information not getting out into a public area? How much is secure? How much is not secure? Right? And we need to be geared up to handle these challenges, especially with the bring your own device concept gaining prominence and certain companies making it a policy saying, bring your own device. Why? Because there's a capex reduction for me. If you're going across and buying an iPad on your own accord, I don't need as a company to provide that to you. Great. Right? I'll enable it for you. Use it from a corporate perspective because it has a wow factor as well. So how do I leverage that? Now that's where the challenge of private and public or enterprise cloud starts coming into picture. How do we use it effectively? And that's where this entire concept of a hybrid cloud has emerged today. Right? Do I need to ensure that every information needs to be on an enterprise cloud or a private cloud only? Or can a part of that information, which is not sensitive, be stored on a public cloud? Because ultimately, storage is still expensive. If I can get a combination of the two, decide what is mission critical and what is not mission critical, what is not overly sensitive. Corporate presentations, product presentations, I'm anyway putting them up on the website. It's not going to be overly sensitive right now. Pricing, absolutely, that's going to be sensitive. So how do I segregate these aspects and share them across? That's where the challenge from an IT perspective, the CIOs, the IT teams have to focus on those more today rather than trying to say, how do I limit data going out onto the public cloud? Right? And that's the challenge which we all need to look towards. And that's where we talk about here the fact that enterprise needs to tap the opportunity which has been created, which exists today. Right? And at the same time, how do I address the security concerns? Because all said and done, public cloud is still not sure from a security point of view. Right? But I can't ignore this particular aspect. Right? And that's where this entire aspect of the service interface, a user could be could be using a tablet, could be using a smartphone, could be using a netbook or a notebook or a PC, any of these devices. How do I leverage the hybrid cloud model from an architectural perspective is what comes across, right? Now these are three realities which we are facing today in terms of there is a mobile revolution which has again driven the social media and the cloud adoption. Take away the mobile portion today and you'll find that we'll go back into the aspect of saying cloud is nothing else but wide area networking, right? There's nothing else there. Public cloud would not exist without a mobile device, frankly. Social media would have probably been still relegated to a personal usage as compared to an enterprise usage. It's just that today there's so much of data and information available, and that's what gives rise to the challenge which we are facing today. This entire aspect of the mobile, cloud, and social media together has today given rise to a huge information overload, right? And this is a challenge which every corporate is facing today. There's a lot of structured data which is generated through formal systems and applications which I have, but there's an equal, if not higher amount of data which is being generated from the unstructured data sources. right? And the volume is only increasing. Just this year alone, it's estimated that 4 exabytes of unique information would be generated, right? I didn't even know the word exabyte before this year. Okay, so it's just that the entire situation is changing. And then we start looking at saying, hang on, from an IT perspective, I used to have these brilliant things known as data warehousing and business intelligence, right? And I've spent a whole lot of money in those aspects. And every time I go back to the vendors to say I need even a kind of a duplication or a backup of that, they come back to me, fantastic, you'll just double your cost. But am I getting the returns out of that? You mentioned you're doing business intelligence areas. That's a focus area for us. But the first approach to that data warehouse and business intelligence is, first tell me, how do you devise your cubes? What is the data which is meaningful? What should I capture? What should I eliminate from that entire data sources? But that means when I'm being bombarded with this information which is coming across to me as both unstructured and structured, I either have to force fit that into the data warehouse which I have, and I'm losing a lot of information and correlation which otherwise would have come to me. How do you use that? The volume is increasing, the velocity is increased. The rate at which it's coming to me is like crazy. If I have to start building my data warehouse to handle that velocity of data, it's just going to kill me, right? The volume is so high that I have to keep increasing my data warehouse size. That's going to be very expensive to me. Then I look at the complexity of data coming across. I've got all these various things coming and hitting me. How do I make a meaningful how do I derive some meaning from this data and take action on it? Reality is, even with business intelligence tools which we have, by the time that data comes back to me and I make some change to it, it's outdated in today's world. I mean, just yesterday I was reading in the Business Week that Samsonite is talking about saying that I've crunched my entire product development life cycle from 4 years to 1 year. New product every 1 year. Okay. I am still saying, okay, let's go ahead with that 1 year. Then they throw an additional challenge saying, previously, every 4 years when a product used to come across, it used to be globally applicable, right? But today, the needs of consumers in China are different from the needs of consumers in India, are different from the needs of consumers in Europe, are different from US. So when I'm talking about that 1 year product life cycle, it's actually including the fact that I'm having 1 year products for every country. The requirements being different, usage being different. How does that data, if that much data is coming to me and hitting me across, how do I make meaning out of it? How do I act on it before my competitor acts on it? Right? That's the biggest challenge which is coming across to people. And they're realizing that the traditional models of data warehousing and business intelligence are just not working anymore. I can keep building my data warehouses, I can try to derive meaning, but it's not fast enough, it's not good enough, right? And that's a challenge. So that's where I just put across this aspect in terms of saying that the enterprise need is to extract value from data, where you're getting variety of data from unstructured and structured. You're having a volume which is coming across with multiple touch points. You have a velocity, it's 24/7, it's global. No longer it's restricted to a particular geography. And you have a complexity of data. Your products are increasing, your services portfolios are increasing, the feedback is increasing, competitors are increasing. And I have to get all of them into a funnel, extract value, which means I have to acquire, organize, analyze, and present that data in a manner which I can actually enhance productivity of the organization and gain competitive advantage. Pretty simple, huh? Right? Child's play for the IT team. That's the reality which we are faced with today, right? And that's why I put it back into this particular slide, which says you have mobile, which has driven social media adoption and social media usage for enterprise, and the cloud, which is creating another challenge for the people. And right in the heart of all this is what you have, data and information, which is hitting you from every side. And you know what? Gartner has this nice way of putting things into a very good perspective. They call it the Nexus of forces. right? So say you have 4 forces which are acting upon you. So it's the cloud, it's social, it's mobile, and it's information. And they're all combining together. So that's a nexus. Great, what does it mean to me? What it means is that all my applications which are here today, whether it's an existing application portfolio or any custom development which I have done, how are they going to handle these aspects? Are they geared up to handle this kind of a stuff? Right? And that's where people have to relook at their entire strategy, right? In terms of saying, I had a particular system in the past. Can it handle mobile? Great, I might build a wrapper around it and get it to handle mobile. But what do I do with the data? Where is it going? How do I derive meaningful insights? How is my application at the back end geared to handle hybrid cloud? So those are challenges which people are facing with and have got to act on it by looking at it, saying that if I'm developing any new applications, it has got to take these key aspects into focus while developing applications. And if you're not doing that even today, then it's like what I talk about, the Bombay infrastructure. We keep developing infrastructure for today, not realizing it'll come 3 years down the line, by which time we've already lost value of that infrastructure, right? So we're building for today, not for tomorrow, is what the challenge is. So that's where we have to be protecting ourselves. So coming back to the concept which I started with, where the CIOs are getting younger, there's another aspect which is hitting across, which is saying that when a line of business manager needs an application, let's look at within our own organizations. What is the process which is happening today? Let's say a product manager wants to have a loyalty program developed. What does he do? He reaches out to the IT team. An IT team says, fantastic, good idea. But you know what? I have a similar request from 10 other product managers, from the finance team, from the operations team, etc., etc. And each of them are as high in terms of priority as your requirements are. So I'm going to put you in the queue. Is that reality? Right? Let me put it in the queue. Okay, great. It's in the queue. Now I have registered the queue. When can I get the system? Probably come back to me in 6 months' time, and I'll tell you because I'm going to schedule it right now. Product manager's requirements are now. So what does the product manager do? He starts into a verbal argument or a fight, or he says, forget it. I'm going to go outside and look for it. Right? Is that happening in the organizations today? It is, right? And then comes the challenge of saying, oh, you very well can go outside, look at the system, get it, no problem. But you know what? You've got to come and integrate it with my applications. So it has to follow my guidelines. That means there's another complexity which has been introduced. So what do you do there? So today, the line of business manager is saying, you know what? I don't have to depend on it. I will give it across on a hosted model. Software as a service, and I will just outsource the entire aspect to that person and say, you do everything for me. All I need is a data, all I need is a correlation so I can act on it itself. That's my only requirement. So at one stroke, I'm eliminating the fact that I have to wait for a queue. I'm eliminating the need to integrate the system into my IT, core IT infrastructure, and I'm still getting my job done. And you're not alone if you're facing these challenges, because what is coming across is the analysis which we did across with CXOs and Gartners also, the thought process is that 35% of all IT systems will not even be factored into IT budgets by 2015. That means even the IT managers will not be involved in that aspect from a budgeting point of view, because line of business managers are going to expense it. They're going to treat it as a business expense. It will be in their P&Ls. They will be actually driving this aspect. So that is where this entire slide came into picture to say that the first thing a line of business manager is going to be looking at today is saying, does a system or somebody who comes to me with a system, does it meet my business objective first? Does it solve my problem today? Because if it doesn't solve my problem, I'm going to miss my forecast for this quarter or this year, which means by the time the IT gets to it, I may not even have a job, right? So I need to meet my business objectives. So first thing is, does it meet my business objective? Great, if it meets it, let's take it. Next thing is it flexible enough? The flexible enough could be in terms of saying, today it addresses one product need of mine, can it expand to other products? Could it expand to other geographies, right? And could it be scalable? Still on an outsourced model. If the answer is no, they might still go with it as a point solution for a specific requirement. If the answer is yes, even better, because I expand the scope. Then the last aspect they're looking at is saying, does it have an integration ability with other systems? Right? If it doesn't have, no worries, I will still run it as a hosted service. I'll get my data, I'll get my results, I'll act on it, and I'll continue running this. And a lot of people have done this, right? But this is the reality which we are facing as IT managers across enterprises. And if we don't wake up to this aspect, the fact is more and more such applications will go outside the control of IT as well, right? So keeping that in mind, what Basil as a PE fund did was to look towards saying that there are some niche areas which have evolved. The niche areas have been along the areas of mobile, cloud, and the social, and the big data initiatives, as we're calling that. And today, people are not just saying, I'm happy with services. I need consulting, people who can advise me on what's to be done. I have a business problem. How do I address that business problem? It's not that I have an IT problem and how do I address an IT problem. I have a business challenge. Tell me how to solve that business challenge. So there's a consulting element. Then there is an element of saying, I want a quick fix solution. Can you assemble a solution together rather than doing a custom application development process? Because that's again a time-consuming process. So do you have something ready-made, or can you look towards certain tools or open source tools and get them together, assemble a solution, give me take care of my problem. Better still, of course, is if you have a product or a productized template or some kind of a framework which is an accelerator. So that's been the focus of a lot of the business users today. And that's where when you look at each of these companies which are here, Endeavour from the enterprise mobility point of view, niche focus, providing mobile assessment, looking towards how do I put together a solution. I can also do mobile custom development, but how do I put a solution together? And with KaiCube, which you've gone through in more detail, it is very clearly taking care of a specific problem which is being faced today by the product companies, which is being faced today by the hospitality industry, and any corporate which wants very quick mobile application rollouts, right? So that's an aspect which has come across, which is of immense value to enterprises. The second aspect is a company called Reach One-to-One from a big data point of view. So big data still hasn't gained a whole lot of adoption, but there are these challenges which we talked about from a data warehousing point of view, which big data using Hadoop, Solar, Neo4j kind of tools really addresses very, very effectively. But again, the question is, out of the box, you can't just take those tools and say, it'll help me in solving my problems. There's got to be certain frameworks, there's got to be certain concepts in place. And that's where Reach One-to-One came up with concepts and accelerators on things like faceted search, as well as the data synchronization engine. Looking towards multiple data sources, putting them all together, extracting the value, and using commodity hardware infrastructure, giving you that business value, right? And the faceted search, which is something which is a very, very important aspect to all companies because of the time required to search this huge amount of data which is there within enterprises today, right? And last but not least is the company called Relevance Lab on the cloud aspect. We talked about the aspect that even in current existing enterprise application portfolios, as well as any custom development which is being done today, needs to have the concepts of cloud, social, mobile built right into the core architecture. And that's the whole concept of the cloud product engineering which comes across. Looking at an application with the eyes of a product approach, rather than looking at it only from meeting a specific need. How does it scale? How does it look at all these aspects? Is what is their first focus in terms of cloud-ready product engineering. The second aspect is in terms of vertical solutions. So with Clinical Cloud, which is a combined effort between these three companies, looking at mobile as a device to capture information, because a lot of large companies in the clinical research side have bought large systems like Oracle. But the smaller companies which are actually doing the physical data collection and the clinical data capture don't have access to those systems. So how do I get them to have an access through a mobile device, capture this information so that it's compliance with the FDA requirements, HIPAA regulatory requirements, because ultimately that data is going to form the basis for your clinical trials, right? So that's an area we're using the mobile device as the data capture engine, using the clinical cloud to capture and integrate with the larger systems, and then analyzing that data using big data is a kind of collaborative effort between these three companies that have come together with, right? And the last slide which I have here literally is in terms of what you've seen from KaiCube, right? I don't need to go much more in detail on this because both the Avinashis have covered that a lot in detail. Same way with clinical cloud, where it actually talks about right from a clinical trial platform to site trial platforms to a clinical portal accessed by the actual patients, by doctors, looking at the entire eTMF, which is very required from the entire regulatory framework perspective, the monitoring as well as the data repository are aspects which are all bundled together as a clinical cloud solution. And last but not least, on the big data side, just showing you from a synchronization server perspective, the UDB architecture which has been developed by Reach One-to-One, which syncs up data from various data sources, right? I think the last thought which I had here was that while the entire adoption of the social media, cloud as well as mobile is only increasing, it's for us as IT managers to decide how we want to use it. Because if we do not use it, it's not that the customers or the users will stop using it. They'll find alternative ways to use it. But ultimately, what's not changing in this entire paradigm is the fact that they're expecting and demanding a very, very high user experience, high degree of user experience. And if the user experience doesn't fall in lines with their requirements, they will discard the solution, however good the functionality might be. Right? So I think these are aspects which we as technologists, we need to really pay attention to and figure out how to package this entire thing in a manner which is palatable, which is useful, and gives immense value to the consumer, be it internal or external. I hope that was useful.